Wednesday, March 21st at 6 p.m. This is the Policy and Services Committee special meeting. David, could you please take the roll?
Councilmember Du Bois? Here. Chair Fine?
Here.
Councilmember Holman?
Here.
Councilmember Walbach?
Here.
4 present.
Thank you very much. I don't see any oral communications from the public. Any comments, or should we just go right into item 1? Let's do it. Item 1, if you have a report, we're happy to receive it. Hi, Harriet.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Harriet Richardson, City Auditor. The Department of Finance Finance on behalf of Administrative Services Department is going to give an update on 3 audits that have been outstanding for a little while. One of them is actually more recent, and this is the first update for continuous monitoring of payments. And cash handling has been out there for a little while, and the cable audit is about 2 years old. So David Ramberg is here to give you the update.
Thank you, Harriet. My name is David Ramberg. I'm the Assistant Director of the Administrative Services Department. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. I have a brief update. We have a cover memo that introduces our attachments, and we have 3 attachments for the 3 audits that we are updating this evening. The main updates, I'll just highlight verbally, have to do with our continuing conversation with the Media Center to address recommendations in the cable audit, and I can go into any of those in more depth if you desire, but those conversations are ongoing, and we are having some progress in addressing those recommendations, and we'll have more to come in the near term as well. The other main area of updates has to do with the accounts payable duplicate payment audit, and we have addressed some of the recommendations in there, and many of the recommendations will take effect once we have greater capabilities in our new enterprise resource planning system, which we are currently in the process of evaluating, and we have been able to confirm that the systems we are looking at do have features that will enable us to better hard stop possible duplicate payments before they occur. And they will also enable us to have a cleaner vendor database. And those are 2 of the primary, 2 of the areas that the audit had recommendations pertaining to. So with that, I'm happy to answer any of the questions you may have on the specifics in the attachment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should we start with the cable franchise and PEG fee audit? And any questions? Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and always for the audit, City Auditor. On 1.2, I did have a question, and you mentioned this. This is so, and all of these, the target dates are sometimes ago and sometimes long ago. On 1.2, though, I was wanting to get more information about the city exploring with the Media Center a proposal for the use of the PEG funds to purchase the Media Center's facility. And then it says under this option, blah, blah, blah. Could you talk more about that? And also, is this a late blooming idea? Is that why it hasn't come forward before, because the target date for this was 2017? So can you help us understand the timing and where this came from and all of that, please?
Sure. It was actually an idea that was brought up when this audit first came to Policy and Services in 2015? Yeah, in 2015. And the essence of the recommendation is that PEG fees, and one of the key points of that audit is that PEG fees by law can only be used to purchase capital equipment or capital facilities. And so at that P&S meeting in 2015, there was a speaker, and it was suggested that a speaker brought up this idea, and the committee suggested that staff look into this idea. So the essence of this idea would allow PEG fees to go directly to acquiring a capital asset. And in this case, the capital asset would be the media center building itself. And what that would do is allow the media center to use more of its operating revenue purely for operations rather than for capital. And all of the PEG fees would then go towards a legally allowable purchase. Does that help answer any of your question?
It does to some extent. So clarification still on that. So can the PEG fees be used for capital maintenance? Because if you're going to buy a building, it has to be maintained somehow. So is that still going to be on the media center, or?
Maintenance is considered an operating expense.
Okay. So I note, because PEG fees can only be used for capital, but I note on the column, it says original target date and response is action plan. The staff will consult with the cable joint powers to determine if there is any interest in subsidizing the media center's operations. So if PEG fees can't be used for operations, it seems like we've lost a year talking about something that isn't possible. I'm just trying to understand.
Right. Did you want to add anything? I can. Okay. So to help you understand further, the concept of purchasing the media center building with PEG fees is a very complicated concept. And there's not many examples of this happening in California or really in the country. So the time that has elapsed from 2015 to now has really been to fully flush out this concept, and we're still doing that, and to ensure that once we are able to present an idea to the City Council, to Policy and Services, which is what your direction was back in 2015, that we can fully explore all of the possible legal ramifications and complications to this acquisition. And to make sure that the committee and the council still want us to pursue that with the inherent complications. So we're in the process of putting that review together, and we will have that before the City Council in the near term, and that's being headed up by Assistant City Manager Ed Shikata.
So just to be clear, I don't mean to be hammering in on this, but I really want to understand. So has this notion of exploring purchasing the capital ownership, has that been explored since 2015? Because again, in the action plan in 2017 was talking about operations, which isn't a feasible thing, so, or not a viable thing.
Can I add a little bit of clarification? So in the audit, and I do want to make a correction, it was 2016, not 2015. Sorry about that, when we issued the audit. But when we did the audit, we identified that they were using the PEG fees for operating expenses. Federal law restricts the use of PEG fees to capital expenses. In the audit, we made a recommendation to pull that money back and revisit the issue of how PEG fees can be used, what we legitimately can use them for. And then the question came up, how do you keep the media center whole? And in our audit, we made a recommendation about looking at other ways. For example, maybe instead of the city keeping the franchise fees, we send the franchise fees to the media center. There were a couple of ways that they could have looked at it. And then during the meeting where we presented the audit, there was a lot of discussion from the public about keeping the media center whole. And someone raised the concept during that presentation about possibly buying the media center as a way, the city buying it as a way to legitimately use the funds. After the audit, then it's out of our hands, and so they took over the discussion and have been in conversation with both the media center, having a lot of conversations between the media center and the city about how to make that happen.
And so in the interest of trying to keep the media center whole, which I think is a broad community interest, not just Palo Alto's, So if we use PEG funds to purchase the facility, but if PEG funds can't be used for maintaining the facility, that's considered operations, how is the media center helped out in any regard other than, how does this help the media center?
And from an audit perspective, it doesn't. But the media center has a fund that has a substantial amount of money. I don't know what it's at right now, but I don't remember the amount. But they were borrowing or using money from that fund to subsidize. And that was money that was given to the media center back when the old AT&T contract went away, and there was a whole settlement on that. And that was given to the media center. And they'd been pulling from that anyway to subsidize what they brought in from revenues. So buying the facility doesn't necessarily make the media center whole. What it does is it gives the city a legal basis for using the funds.
And I'll add a little bit to that. So if you can think of the stream of revenue right now, the stream of revenue is PEG fees that come in from, and PEG stands for Public Education and Government, just so everyone understands that acronym, which is paid via subscribers, via the Comcast and AT&T bills in the cable JPA. And the cable JPA, for those who aren't aware, is the city of Palo Alto, the city of Menlo Park, the city of Atherton, East Palo Alto, and portions of unincorporated areas of San Mateo and Santa Clara County, which is roughly the Stanford campus. So way back in the 80s, those entities got together and established the cable JPA, and that's still in existence today. And the city of Palo Alto is the lead agency for the cable JPA. So all of those agencies get PEG fee revenue from the bills. All that revenue comes into Palo Alto, and per the agreement with the media center, which the city council has approved, all of that PEG fee revenue goes straight to the media center. That's been the long-standing revenue stream. That revenue stream will continue straight to the media center, but it will first go towards the acquisition of the building. So the proposal that we're exploring is that the title of the building transfers from the media center to the city, and then the city pays down that title through a stream of revenue every month that comes from PEG fees. And that will enable the media center to continue to receive the PEG fees as they always have, and once they receive them, they will no longer be considered PEG fees. They will be simply revenue that they can use for operations or any other need that they may have. The revenue will have stopped being PEG revenue once it goes towards the capital purchase, and that will we think that will satisfy the capital purchase requirement of federal law. And that's what we're really looking into right now, to make sure that that transaction, once it's established, and it will be in place for 30-some years, because it'll take a while for us to pay down that building value, which the media center owns in whole. So that's good, they own it in whole. And they've had it for quite some time, but we need to make sure that that arrangement will stand the test of time, and that it will stand the test of any sort of scrutiny as to how PEG fees are being used. But we think it'll work.
Okay, and I'm not quite sure if this is the time to ask this question or not. I don't know when else to ask it. And thank you for your patience, because I haven't been on policy and services for some time now, and when these come to council, we don't get a chance to really dig into them that much. So one last question on this one. It was the one I was the most interested in, really, in the first section of this at least, is we're purchasing the facility, not the land. In terms of assets and investment, and understanding we're not using city money to buy it, but is there any obligation or onus that would be taken on by the city? So in other words, is this an asset or a liability? And it is just the building, it's not the land, correct?
They actually own both. It's both the building and the land.
Okay.
It's over there right off of San Antonio.
I know where it is.
Great.
I've been there many times.
Yeah.
But this just says facility, so I just wanted to get clear on that. So it's the land and the building.
Correct.
Okay, that's good. And from a real estate perspective, an investment perspective, is this, then I would presume it's more asset than liability then, if we're getting the land too.
Well, it will be, first of all, it will be the JPA's asset and liability.
Right, but we're the lead.
Yeah, and we'll have it on, I haven't thought through entirely the accounting of this and how it will look, but it will be both. It will show up in both the asset column and the liability column for the JPA theoretically. Because we will have to pay down, we will be paying down that liability over time, and then the full value of the asset would transfer to the JPA after it's completely paid down.
And are the other members of the JPA helping with the administrative costs of doing this?
So, great question.
I can answer.
Do you want to answer that?
So when the funds come in and Palo Alto administers the distribution of the fund and monitors all of the revenues that come through both the PEG fees and the franchise fees. So we have the cable coordinator who does all of that work, and before that money is distributed to the JPAs, the franchise fees and the PEG fees are sent to the media center, the city deducts its administrative costs. So that never hits the JPA revenues. It's deducted before they get their revenues and before the media center gets PEG fees.
And that will continue with the potential purchase of the facility?
It should, because we're the ones that are required through the JPA agreement to administer the whole JPA agreement.
I appreciate your patience and your indulgence. Thank you.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Just to follow up on that last comment. So the PEG fees are being used to pay for our administrative costs?
No, let me clarify. No, the administrative costs all come off the franchise fees portion.
Okay. And the franchise fees are much smaller than the PEG fees, aren't they?
No, I believe it was the other way. It was the other way around. The PEG fees were smaller than the franchise fees.
So the city keeps the franchise fee, well, the JPA.
Their portion of the franchise fees. The franchise fees are allocated to each of the JPA members based on the percentage of subscribers from each of those areas.
Right. Yeah, so again, for those on policy and services that weren't here, this was probably the largest P&S meeting that it was pretty much full. We were in here, and I think council direction was again pretty clear. Wanted to support the media center. I thought it's been quite a while, so I forgot a lot of the details. But I thought we had said, we were going to try to be as flexible as we could to make sure the money would flow through. It sounds like this is a good approach, and hopefully we can resolve it. I think at the time, the media center, they were doing some fundraising, I think, trying to raise fees for operations. And I think this idea of selling the building, selling the land had appeal to them. I mean, are they engaged with us? Are they working with us on this?
They are very, very engaged with us. They're very motivated.
Okay.
This is as far as they see it, it's a very feasible solution to this, dilemma. And the dilemma is that the PEG fees, as we've said earlier, really satisfy had historically satisfied a portion of their operating expenses. Right. And that is needed for, something needs to fill that.
So are they being
chunk.
strained right now?
What's that?
Are their finances being strained in the interim period here?
My understanding is no, not in the short term, and it's still relatively in the short term because they do have a reserve that's quite healthy. And I understand that they are drawing upon that reserve when needed. And they are sequestering the PEG fees currently in a separate account to adhere to the requirements. I would also note that they've gone through some transition at the leadership level at the Media Center. You might have heard they had their longtime executive director leave last year, and they have been in the process of bringing on our new executive director, and that person's been on, I believe, for about 6 months at least, if not a little bit longer. So some of this delay has been to allow for transitions on sort of both sides sides around this project.
Okay.
But they are fully engaged. We'll be meeting with them in the coming month.
Yeah, so I do hope, yeah, it starts moving forward, because I thought it might strain their finances. I think the other question I had was on this, the last point about kind of where does this fall within the city's organization? And why is that taking so long?
Well, I'll sort of jump in on that. I think, you know, the function, there's quite a bit of history to the function of cable coordinator and cable operations here at the city, and it's been in the clerk's office, and that's still where the municipal code says it should reside. It's also served as there's been a technology element to it, so it's resided in the technology department for quite some time, including when the IT department was under ASD. And the IT department is still retaining the technology components of it, but the administration part really is better suited in an administration type department. So right now, as we determine where the ultimate landing place for this function will be, and it will be, we believe it's an ongoing required function as long as we have cable services here in the city, and the media center and a host of other kind of duties. The Administrative Services Department it has the function right now, and will continue the administrative part of it, and we'll be, that's sort of down lower on our priority list, because we want to address some of these other.
It just seems like an easy thing to get off your list, and it was
I think the city manager's office is thinking about that as part of the host of everything that's being considered right here as part of this audit.
Okay, again, I guess the target date was fourth quarter 2016. We've pushed it out to the end of 2018 now. Just seems like a small thing that we could resolve, but okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wolbach, any questions on this one? All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to attachment B. This is the citywide cash handling and travel expense audit, first issued in 2010.
So I can answer any questions you may have.
It's really the same question I just asked, which is why is this one taking so long?
I think probably Harriet might want to chime in as well at some point, but this final it has been a long time. So 2010 was quite a number of years ago. We've chipped away at this audit. This remaining item has to do with tracking meals that the city pays for, that employees receive, that should be showing up as a payment on an employee time card, and thus on an employee W-2 as a benefit, a payable benefit. We have very few of these meals in the city. The vast majority of meals that get paid for with city funds are for meals that have a direct city business purpose, and we can document that purpose.
That's okay, those don't need to be taxed.
Correct, that's not considered a taxable benefit, and Harriet can jump in at any point. She knows this very well. So what we're so this has been sort of not a huge return for us in terms of focusing our attention and effort, and it's also quite complicated because we don't track these. It's not easy for us to track these kinds of meals. We know when we pay a reimbursement for these type of meals, but all of that is done on paper right now. These are largely meals that occur in an instance of possibly traveling. They are also meals that sometimes occur when a staff person attends a council meeting at night. It might be a meal there. And so they're not captured easily in our financial system, and thus they're not easy. It's not easy for us to put them on an employee W-2. And we don't think we have huge exposure in this area in terms of kind of IRS requirements, but we want to get it fixed. And so we have a new form in place that will and everyone loves a new form, so it's not the most popular thing, but we have a new meals policy that is in draft form, and part of that meals policy is a new form that an employee would fill out that would categorize these types of meals. That form would come to accounts payable. We would process it and validate it, and it would get passed on to payroll for inclusion in an employee pay stub. So there's system configuration that has to occur. There's process some new process development that needs to occur, which isn't really the heavy lift. But the system configuration in SAP is quite complicated, as you've heard, and sometimes that's a costly endeavor, and it takes time to test. So it's something we've been inching towards, and we need to do it, and we're closer than we have been in the past. And I think our new timeline is having that completed in this calendar year.
And I probably asked this last time. Is there no way to qualify more of these meals as business justified?
So the IRS has a category of taxable income that they call taxable fringe benefits, and this falls within that category. So there's two different types of meals that we were looking at. The meals when an employee travels, you get per diem for, those are not taxable. When it's a meal that does not occur in the regular course of business but is considered more of a benefit to the employee than a convenience to the employer. So this particular instance, they're considered a benefit to the employee because they're cited in the MOUs as a benefit. And I'm just thinking that as I say this, that maybe taking it out of the MOUs could make it not seem so much like a benefit, an occasional convenience for the city. That might be the easier solution.
I mean, you and I think I've talked about this.
Right.
Private companies, it's done for the convenience of the business.
And so the IRS is actually cracking down a little bit more on some of those where the big companies have the big cafeterias and they give free lunches. They're cracking down a little bit more on it, but the idea is that if an employee gets a benefit, the occasional benefit, but it's cited as a benefit, it's going to be taxable.
Yeah. I still think it's a shame that this would show up as taxable income when somebody's working late, and it's really for the benefit of the city. And if there was a way to go the other direction and maybe take it out of the MOUs, it seems like a much easier process. So.
It's something that has to be negotiated because it's in the MOUs now, and employees won't like having it taken out, but it actually probably is an easier.
I mean, if they understood they'd be paying taxes on it, they might go for it.
Correct.
All right.
Councilmember Wolbach?
I second what Tom said.
So could you give me a couple of examples, one or two examples of what kind of meals we're talking about? Obviously, they're not travel expense.
So it would be, for example, the management professional agreement, compensation plan, it's not really an MOU, has a provision in it that employees who stay late at night, for example, for a council meeting like this meeting, if they go get a dinner meal somewhere, they can turn in the receipt and get paid, reimbursed for that meal. Those are primarily the meals we're talking about, and that meal is taxable as a taxable fringe benefit. And so that's really the main meal we're talking about. So I would think that no employee is going to abuse this by going out and getting a lobster dinner, or something of that nature. But there's a note here that's saying, like, maybe looking at using the per diem rate. What about that? Is that so? For this particular benefit that we're talking about, there's a cap on it in the for management professional. I'm not sure about all the other MOUs, but there's a cap on it that's $20 for the meal. So it doesn't directly correlate to the per diem rates for meals. It's a hard cap on it.
Is that unreasonable? The $20 cap, is that unreasonable? If somebody's working late, they're probably not going to go out and And alcohol isn't covered anyway, so.
Right. No, I don't think that the $20 cap is unreasonable, but it's a taxable fringe benefit.
So even if it's considered yeah, I think maybe what Tom was asking about too, and what you were saying about taking it out of the MOU. It seems like an awful lot of effort, a lot of work for not much return. And unless some employee, which surely a supervisor would notice, unless some employee is abusing it by steak dinners, lobster dinners, whatever,
And I think you can address that in the way the rest of the meal reimbursement policy is written.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It has been a long time, and I agree with you. It's like it needs to be addressed. It has been open for a long time, but it's also a lot of effort for, I don't know how much money that we're talking about, but, and it's not even about the money, but the process, but it's just, I can imagine it's frustrating on management side too.
We are looking at, it's definitely on the table to see if we can, remove these from the MOU. So that's absolutely being discussed. You can also imagine too that the custom has been that, fortnight meetings that employees need to attend, the $20 meal, it's usually, for a lot of people, it's walking to Whole Foods and grabbing something real quick before the meeting, and they get reimbursed with their receipt for the amount of the meal. They don't get a flat $20. So sometimes it's less, sometimes it's exactly 20, or, they only get 20 and they spent 25 or something. But that helps a little bit. So we're trying to strike that balance, so that we don't simply yank something away, but if we need to do that, that's definitely something that we've been talking with HR about.
Just a silly question here is like, and this probably wouldn't work. It probably really wouldn't work. It probably opens another hornet's nest, but I know in at least one company I used to work for, there was, for such kinds of events where there were people working late and stuff, there was a petty cash where people could go out and bring pizzas back and stuff like that. So I don't know if, like I say, petty cash is a whole other issue. So probably that's a rat's nest that you don't want to get into, but.
Whether it's petty cash or however you reimburse it, the way it's set up right now, it would still be taxable. And that might actually throw another wrinkle into the mix for how you have to track it.
Petty cash is a whole other ugly animal, so.
Thank you. So I'm mostly in agreement with my colleagues. This is a benefit we do want to try and preserve for employees. So if it is looking at removing the benefit from the compensation agreements or MOUs, that's something we may want to consider. Or if we can kind of consider many of these meal benefits as the regular course of business. I don't know, I'm trying to, are they kind of concentrated in a single area? Like, is it really the council meetings and gym and
I would say that's probably most of them.
So could we just designate like a P card for that or something?
So the P card is the form of payment. So it's really still money going out. So whether, it's P card or whether it's, their cash that they're getting reimbursed with, it's still money going out of the city one way or the other. And we would have to essentially have to track it the same way, even if it was P card, yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
All right, well, thank you for your continued work on this one. Should we move on to attachment C, the payments audit? Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, I'd like, if we could get the city auditor to make some comments about how this is working in terms of being built into the new ERP, and what the progress of that is and what the satisfaction is of that.
So my office is not directly involved in looking at what is being proposed by the vendors for the new ERP system, but we do have several.
But you're looking at it, excuse me for interrupting a second, but you're looking at it in terms of, from an auditing perspective, will this satisfy the criteria to pass an audit? That's your function in looking at the ERP, correct? Sort of.
Not exactly. So what our recommendation is really about, can the new ERP system have a function built into it that would allow this sort of a continuous monitoring process with the ability to identify when you're getting ready to pay an invoice, identify it as a potential duplicate payment so that they have to stop right then and there. And I believe that David already said that they've put some sort of a hard stop in the current ERP system, SAP, to make, before it was just a warning that came up and it could be bypassed. Now it's a hard stop where someone has to actually stop and look and say, is this a duplicate payment of something else? And they're supposed to stop and go look and verify that. But having that function in a new ERP system, you would want to build in some other things like unique invoice numbers and things like that, but there is some complication with that also. So we do want to make sure that to the extent that a new ERP system has that capability, which most of them do, that it's actually set up to implement that function.
And how close are we, just a quick update here, how close are we to having the new ERP system?
We are in the demonstration and reference checking phase of the project. So we will wrap that phase of the project up in the next few months. And what I've heard is that there will be an update coming to the City Council shortly thereafter on the status.
And a little bit of an aside question, I'm acknowledging that. As you've gone through this process and tried to narrow down functions and all of that, do we have a price tag that's getting clearer?
We don't have a final price tag that's getting clear,
Well,
but
close.
there are ranges that are provided with the proposals that we've received.
And do you remember those offhand?
You know, the process is still ongoing, so we're at a phase where we're still closed with regards to information coming out of the process, so I can't divulge that at this time. But that would be part of what will be provided to the council with the updates. I think a price tag range was communicated at the start of this whole process, and that's probably still the most relevant until we kind of get through this phase.
It was. I just wonder if there was any appropriate updates or honing in of that. So yes, there was. You're exactly right.
Any other comments, questions, motions to move these forward? Councilmember Wolbach.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. So we have a motion to move the staff recommendation. Thank you all for coming tonight and for the audits. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next up is future meetings and agendas, which you see here. Rob, I just sent you an email about it. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Let Rob lead off, maybe.
Good evening, council members. We don't have many items in the latter part of the year or after June, but we do have a fairly full schedule for April and May. And the chair and I work on setting the agenda with the support of the city manager, and typically most of the items that get on the agenda are a reference back to the Policy and Services Committee by the full council. So we'll see what comes from council.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolbach.
Just looking ahead at, I'm not going to make a motion, but just wanted to highlight a couple things that I would like to see us get on the agenda. Just my suggestion to the chair and also to staff. On the back page, item number 2, the review of economic analysis regarding the housing inclusionary program. I don't know if we have an idea of when that could come or would be ready, or is that coming to us before the economic analysis is done, or are we drawing off of an economic analysis that already has been done, or is it in the works?
Yeah, I'll have to check with the planning director on that.
Okay,
I know they're down some staff right now, so they're not moving quite as quickly as they would like on some of these housing items, but I will report back.
Well, I'll just highlight that as one I'd be interested in discussing, certainly this year, if not in the first half of the year. And then some of the informational items at the bottom. I think that the senior programs update, the track watch update, and the homeless services, including safe parking update, are all of great interest to me. I think everybody on this committee. And also beyond that, was curious if we should expect on this committee or at full council any update on or discussion about Coverly in the next few months. Sorry, I'm still getting over my flu. I was just wondering about whether a update or discussion about Coverly is something that we would be discussing either at this committee or at council. It's something I'd recommend a check-in about. Just putting it out there for, if you don't have anything to add right now, that's fine. I just wanted to put it out there for consideration.
I think that'll go to the full council. Councilmember Walbach, we've put out an RFP for consultant support, and we've reviewed those and interviewed the respondents. We have a preferred consultant. They're coming in later this month to meet Jim Keene and the interim superintendent, and then we'll bring the contract to the full council for you to review the scope of services.
That's great. That's more good news than I was expecting tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Holman.
First of all, thank you, Rob, for providing this. I was grousing that we didn't have it, so thank you for getting this to us. The minutes from the last meeting?
Yes, they were not included in the packet?
No, I'd mentioned that in the email I'd sent.
Okay, I missed that. I will look into that.
Because I was thinking that we maybe mentioned some things that we wanted on future agendas in those minutes, but I can't remember, so they may or may not be captured in this list. So if you could get those to us, it'd be really great. And in the interim, we might have some things we want to add to the agenda. I concur with what Councilmember Walbach said about the items, actually I would say ERP, senior programs, fiber, track watch, and the home, all the things here for information items. I'd like to see those agendized as action items because there's a lot of, I know Corey, and I'll just say, I'll pick Corey here. I know he and I have mutual interest in a number of these items, and just to come as information items where we can't make any recommendations or make any motions is just not satisfying. I also note that we're only scheduled to have one meeting a month, and that was the practice several years ago. I know last year that this committee didn't meet very often, but also for a good number of years, this committee was taking on some of the responsibilities that finance sometimes would see. So there was more of a balance of responsibility and taking some of the load off of finance. So I think it was mentioned at the last meeting that one meeting a month was not going to accomplish the things that we wanted to address. I remember fairly clearly that was stated. So is there any reason why these information items could not be action items? And what do we do about getting any of these things on the to-be schedule or the information items calendared?
Thank you for the question. And I'm new to Policy and Services Committee, so still trying to work it out a little bit. When we were at the last meeting and we had individual council members just bringing up different topics that they wanted to have on the agenda, I was a little concerned about that in terms of just process, and I did follow up with the city manager, and he actually said that's not the way items get on Policy and Services Committee. It's really the city council that refers items to Policy and Services Committee, or as the city manager, he can put something on, and you can, of course, convince the city manager that something should go on, and you should do that if you think that it ought to be there. But not just individual interests of individual council members to take up committee time.
So that's the way it works at Finance Committee as well. And if there are a number of us who want to, maybe other council members here would like to support seeing some of these things as action items, we can't initiate, as I mentioned to you about some other item, we can't initiate work or give direction to staff, but we can say to unless it's a fallout from something else that we're already working on. But we can refer to council things that we would like to have agendized for Policy and Services Committee. So from where you're sitting right now, would it take like a straw poll of us to say, I'll just pick on homeless services, including safe parking update, to get that calendared as a regular item? Would it take 2 or 3 of us, let's just say this evening, to take a straw poll and say, we would like to ask council to have that agendized for Policy and Services? What are you thinking the process is? Because I don't want this list to just languish.
Are you asking whether we have council give us the ability to choose in a policy such as homeless services, or that we take a stand and say on homeless services, we think council should do X?
Yeah, we would make recommendations to.
Which,
We make recommendations to the council, so it would have to be an item, it would typically be an item that would come to Policy and Services to vet. We would make a recommendation to council to then take action. That's what would typically happen.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'd echo a lot of that. I think, again, the minutes from last time, I think we had a pretty good list. I didn't take these as new items. I mean, these are existing policy and service items that have come to us that I think we were looking for updates, many of them. I think senior programs came to us. Track Watch has been here. I'm certainly interested in homeless services. I think Cupperly has been here before too. So I would be interested in that. Basically, if we want to forward a list of items to put on council's consent calendar that Policy and Services is going to work on these, I think that would be good. I guess one other one that, and I say this a little facetiously, but do we want to try to agendize maybe for the next meeting a discussion on potential ballot measures? Should we agendize for the next meeting a discussion of potential ballot measures? So, I mean, I think things are happening that aren't going to council. I think if there's a way for us to, maybe emphasize the process, that would be good. And so, Karen, I don't know if you've seen that in the past, that we just vote to suggest we're going to work on certain things and have that sent to council.
So I'd suggest not doing it at this meeting. If a majority of this committee does want to forward recommendations to council for them to tell us to agendize, I'm happy to entertain that. I have some comments of my own on these that I think may agree with some of you guys, but I don't want us to take a vote now to agendize something and force Rob to do it.
Should we maybe schedule time at the next meeting to talk about that?
If you want to bring forward a memo or something like that on specific items that you think council should assign to us, I'm happy to agendize that for a few minutes.
So it shouldn't take a, you need to turn your mic on.
Maybe we just do it as discussion of the agenda at the next meeting. We just plan on that.
Let me chat with Rob first, but willing to entertain that.
Well, let me say, in the past, I haven't been here for like 3 years or 4 years, something like that, but before that I was here for a few years in a row. And what we would do is we would have, because again, this isn't like, we're not giving staff a workload, we're not directing staff, other than if staff would bring back on next month's agenda, so we're not looking 2 months out, if staff would bring back on next month's agenda the list of things that are on this list that you've heard mentioned this evening, and that would be picked up from the minutes from the last meeting, which we don't have. Bring those to us as an agenda item that we can then move on which ones we would like to refer to council to give us direction to proceed on. And if there are ones from the city manager's perspective that are, as Tom suggested, updates for things that have been here before, like Track Watch, for instance, perhaps you could come back with an item. Again, not information items, because it really is, it is no help and no assist, I think, for anybody. Maybe those updates could be provided to Policy and Services without going through this whole, get it to council, get on the council agenda, then get it back here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, Councilmember Holman. I think we can...
Trying to be expeditious and practical.
I think we can do that. I was just thinking about another approach. I can help as well with the city manager. We see him all the time, and if I let him know that the committee's interested in this topic. What do you think? You'll want to know what specifically are they interested in, what is the policy question that we're grappling with. So getting some definition on some of these things would be helpful. And the chair also obviously connects with the city manager too, and can suggest things that can sometimes be a quicker route to get something on the committee agenda.
And just lastly, I think I would say, I think staff could anticipate, given the number of things just that are here, I think the staff can anticipate more than one meeting a month. And again, this has long been the practice of trying to balance the load between finance and policy and services, trying to get some things moved through and not just, we're not getting to this, we're not getting to that. Let us help you with getting some of these things addressed.
Thank you. So just a couple comments. I am a little hesitant about us just having a brainstorm session to figure out new things to come back to policy and services and then ask council if we want to work on them. I think there are a couple that probably meet the Venn diagram test where all 3 or 4 of us are interested in a few things. Coverly seems to be one of those, but it's going to council. I hope that satisfies all of us. Couple quick questions. For the economic analysis, you said that's just kind of dependent on Hillary's department and staffing a little bit?
Correct.
Okay. As far as I understand them, I don't think we would have much useful input to give on a nexus study of that type. So I'm interested in just seeing what comes from Hillary's department, and then we'll pass on a recommendation to council. I would note to us the fire emergency medical services future needs assessment is actually a really big item, right? And although our agenda might look a little bit light, that one will probably be 2 meetings. I'd suggest the ERP replacement, I think probably should just go straight to the full council. We're all going to have comments, but I think so will our colleagues, actually. I think everyone's interested in it that I've talked to. And then the one I might agree with Councilmember Holm in the homeless services and safe parking update, that might be something where we probably benefit from making some recommendation. I think if it were to go to council anyways, council would direct us to use a certain policy direction and have us comment on it. We can take a first pass at it and then try to convince our colleagues of that route. I saw Councilmember Wolbach.
As the immediate past chair of the committee, and Tom was the chair before that, I think we want to be respectful of the current chair and his role. My sense from the 2 years in the past that I've been on this committee, both as chair and as a regular member, is that the chair works with city manager and his deputy, or whoever the primary point person is for the committee, to plan out future agendas, including suggesting things for the city manager to include on those agendas. And I think the city manager and his staff are generally open-minded and understand if there's a strong push from the chair for a particular item to be included, they usually get it, or at least can have a conversation about it. So for me, my recommendations here, I'm not trying to get us to the point of having motions, and I don't think we need to go to council. I don't remember us doing that in the past to say, hey, council, can we talk about something? I think the process is we make suggestions, as we did at the last meeting or making tonight. The chair and city staff can discuss the future agenda items. If any council member feels like a committee is not handling their workload or is not taking up an issue that they were supposed to take up, whether they think it's because of the chair or because of the staff or because whatever the reason is, then a colleague's memo to council is, I think, the appropriate way to go. But maybe first, even before that, is talk to maybe pull the chair aside or pull the staff aside and say, hey, how come I'd really like to see this get on the agenda. But I do think it's appropriate for council members on the committee to mention, to throw out and say, hey, we'd love to talk about something at the future meeting. At this point, it's a suggestion. It's okay for us to say it, okay for you to listen, and you might or might not take the recommendation. But I don't think we need to. I think that is how we've done it in recent years. I don't think it needs to go through council through a formalized process unless we feel frustrated that something is not getting agendized. I do agree that some of these things that are informational should probably be action. So my recommendation, would be certainly the homeless services should be an action item if that's coming to P&S. I think it should come to P&S. I can't remember when we were talking about our housing work plan if that was one of the ones that we were referring, but I do think that would be a great action item for P&S to take up this year. And as far as the number of meetings, yeah, I didn't write them all out, and, but I was going through, actually, because this came up before. Remember, at the last meeting, I was going through the past agendas and counting up, just, but I didn't write them down, the number of meetings per year. And I don't think that having 2 meetings a month is something P&S has done in a long time. So I think that actually the number of meetings we had last year was pretty on par with recent years. And I think that an average of 10 to 14, so averaging about 1 meeting per month, is appropriate for this committee with some variance up and down. That's just what I saw eyeballing the last decade or so. We could always change our policy at Policy and Services.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Yeah, I think it's been a good discussion. I'm not really sure what would be in the ERP update. I would just say I think it would be appropriate to come here if it was a kind of fairly detailed review, and that most of the council probably would not be that interested. If it's the final purchase decision, then yeah, that should go to council. But to me, a detailed discussion about a resource planning software probably belongs to Policy and Services. But just a thought.
Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, thank you. I maybe need to clarify something I said earlier. So if there are things that are updates, it seems like those could just come to Policy and Services. I don't think we need to, but I do think we need to have these on a list like this, along with the ones that could probably be in the last minutes, so we can talk about which ones we want to prioritize and stuff. But updates, it doesn't seem like we'd have to go to council. If there's something that's new on that list, and again, I don't remember everything there, if there's something that's new and would require a fair amount of staff time, then that's something that would have to go to council to get direction to yeah, Policy and Services, go explore this. But most of this stuff is things that would come to us anyway. And the city policy and procedures update, that's the annual update, that's a requirement for the city council. Because this is written as city, does that include board and commission as well?
Yeah, I think so. We have city policy and procedures, of course, and a manual. We also have council policies and protocols, which is...
Procedures and protocols, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe that one, the Policy and Services Committee also reviews, so there's 2
it's an annual requirement, actually, that it be reviewed and updated.
And I don't think it's happened every year, though. I don't believe it happened last year, but I think I checked, and it was 2015, I think was the last time it came through the committee. But.
And if we could just confirm that that includes, that, again, because this is written as city, if that would include board and commission.
Yep, I will confirm that.
So hopefully that provides some clarification. And I'm not trying to say that we should meet twice a month. I'm just saying if the ambition and the number of topics that are before the committee might require more than 1 meeting a month,
We will do it.
that we should be open to doing that.
Councilmember Du Bois.
Sorry, I could swear it came to us both the last 2 years. There was pretty substantial discussion, and then last year I thought it was fairly light with a few things that were left open that Molly had come back to us with.
The one I looked at was the council policies and protocols. Is that the one?
Yeah, because we had pretty extensive discussion about dialing into meetings.
Okay, I'll look again, because the most current one I could find that was redlined was 2015, but and that's all the clerk's office could find. But I'll look again.
If you could just update us next round, that'd be great. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you all.
So do you know when we might be able to get the minutes, or maybe David might help us with when we might be able to get the minutes for the last P&S meeting? It's not urgent, but we certainly want them sometime before too long.
Shortly, I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I think we could be able to get those ready to be included in the packet for the next.
I think Councilman Holman's talking about last month's minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm talking about the February 13th, 2018.
Oh, okay, takes that long.
Where the clerk's office is reviewing, we don't, we have minutes from this body, rail, finance,
Okay.
and council, and we are working on a backlog to get those posted and available to the public and council.
Just, I've heard comments from the public too, and I'm not going to nail this on anybody because I don't know whose responsibility it is to post them, but I've heard comments from the public that, and I'm making this up, don't hold me to these, that like the last rail committee minutes are like back to last June, and various board and commission meeting minutes aren't posted for quite a long time. So I know they've been made available, but it seems like they're not getting posted. So, and again, I don't know if it's the clerk's responsibility or the lead department's responsibility. So I'm not pointing a finger at anyone, just raising the concern that I've heard from members of the public.
All right, thank you all so much. It's 7 p.m. and we are adjourned.